Welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And we're working our way through Parshat Noach as far as Torah Temimah is concerned. And again, these beautiful, beautiful little pieces of interpretation, on the part of Torah Temimah. So. So when Noah got off the ark, it says, "Vayive Noach mizbeach." This the print in this book is not the greatest. Mizbeach Lashem. So Noah built an altar to God, and it says, "Vayikach michol habehema haTorah," and he took from all the cattle that were pure. And I'd say, okay, what I'm going to do, and I'm going to type this in here. I'm going to try and type this in here. See, yep, there it is. Domesticated animals. That's what I'm going to. I saw this as a lovely translation. Domesticated animals, the pure, umikol ha'ofen tahor, and from all the pure uh, fowl, vayal olot b'mizbeach, and he made burnt offerings. He offered burnt offerings on the altar. Okay. So this is what he did when he got off the ark. And one has to think that perhaps gratitude was at the very basis of all of this. At any rate, Mizbeach. Amar Rabbi Elazar said, Mizbeach. So he takes this word Mizbeach and he makes a bunch of words. He uses it, as Torah Temimah goes to tell us, as a shorthand, a notaricon, right? Shorthand. Mizbeach. Maziach, it removes. Mazin, it provides food. Mechavev, it endears. Umechaper, and it atones. So he's seeing this as shorthand for these various functions of the Mizbeach. And we'll go into more detail now as to what do we say. So Meziach, it removes Gzeirot Ra'ot, evil edicts, Ma'al Yisrael, from the people of Israel. Mazin, and it feeds, right? Mazin. Sheha'olam nizon bischut korbanot, because the world is fed, right, through the merit of the offerings sheba'im min hamazon, that come from, in fact, food, right? The offerings are made up of food matter, right? Whether it's animal sacrifices, but they're libations, and there's oil, and there are flour offerings, etc. Vegormin lo bracha, and they cause blessing to come upon it. Part of blessing, I want to emphasize, is abundance. The fact that you never have to worry about a lack of it. That if you try to deconstruct the concept of blessing, one major meaning of it is never to suffer lack, that you will have abundance of it. Right? If you're blessed with food, it means you have so much you never have to worry about having a lack of food. Mechabev, and it endears, it Yisrael Aviam Shabashamayim, it endears Israel to their Father in heaven, Umechaper Avonotehem, and it atones for their sins. So let's go on. V'chol and all of this, darish bederech notarikon, right? This is all interpreted by means of notarikon, taking this word and using it as a shorthand indication, right? Vehine, and indeed, kavanu drasha zo kan, and we set this particular interpretation here. In other words, I chose to have this interpretation here, this particular interpretation here, right? Ya'an, because ki po hu hamakom harishon, because this is the very first time in the Torah, shekatuv sham mizbeach b'Torah, where the word mizbeach appears in the Torah. This is the very first time, right? Omnam, however, so that's the reason he's got it here, right? The first time you come across mizbech, and so we deconstruct it in this particular way. So, however, behemshech hiburena, but he says, as we continue our essay, her anu ladad, it becomes apparent, right? Kama pamim, several times, ki bidrashot ka'ela, that these kinds of interpretation, right, shebegamara, that are found in the Gemara, al harov, for the most part, yesh lahem lachazal, the sages of blessed memory have, eza diuk, some diuk means some sort of way of looking at it in a particularly careful kind of way, right? So that's a diuk. For ha'ara would be an explanation, but oto halashon in that particular term. She'eno mityashev lefi pshuto, which according to the regular pshat, the regular way of interpreting a word, it wouldn't appear. In other words, the word mizbeach itself wouldn't give you these particular concepts. And they feel that having these concepts associated with the act of bringing sacrifice up on an altar is very, very important and should be associated with the word mizbeach. But the only way they can associate it with the word mizbeach is to use the word mizbeach as notarikon, as an abbreviation, as shorthand, right? Let's find it. Mishum, right? And here's the point. Mishum de im lo hachi, right? If this were not the case, ma machrichu lidrosh. In other words, why do they feel a need to interpret this word in this particular way at this time? It's not a pshat way of interpreting a word, but they feel that is something that needs to be associated with the mizbeach, but they can't do it in a simple, a literary way. They have to go to a notarikon, to a shorthand, to say this is the way we can mine out these particular meanings or significance of the mizbeach through this particular means. V'kan, but how here, in this case, lo nitba'er ma kasher laho lachazal. It's not so clear as to why our sages are having difficulty, right, b'shem mizbeach, regarding the name mizbeach. Asher shorsho, because its root is Mishem Zevach. It's from the noun sacrifice, a sacrifice. And these particular concepts, right, are all in the nature of sacrifice. In other words, the idea of bringing and presenting such a sacrifice, right, or an offering, right, is to achieve these things. These very things that they're saying, are embedded in the word Mizbeach. But the truth, I know, and he's just said that normally these things happen when our sages aren't able to get out these particular ideas. But the truth is, you could. You could get these ideas out of what is the whole idea behind this offering? Well, it's to remove evil decrees, right? And when we're talking about that, you're saying about when God has decided to punish human beings. These are the kinds of things we're talking about. When the actions on the part of human beings or on the part of the Jewish people deserve accountability and judgment. And this act of sacrifice is an attempt to say to God, we are truly, truly, truly sorry. Please do not punish us in this particular way. It's also, as he mentions in the other three concepts, it's also associated with them. Just from the idea of zevach, right? An offering, right? V'nikra al shem hazvachim shema'alim alav. And the reason it's called a mizbech is because of the offerings that are placed upon it. Right? In other words, the word mizbech, sort of, even though we would translate it as an altar in English, in Hebrew, it's sort of the object on which offerings are placed. That's the word mizbeach. V'hu Hashem mikdash. It's just similar to the noun mikdash, sanctuary, Okay, sanctuary because it is a holy place, right? Mishkan, the word Mishkan, again, from the word Shechina, Shechen, Shachen, to dwell, right? In other words, that the Mishkan is a place in which the divine delights to dwell, and that's why it's called a Mishkan. The idea of it, being a place where the divine can be experienced, v'chodome, and similar kinds of examples. So we're left with this question: why Dafka here? V'lachein, and for this reason, it appears, the ikar hadrasha, that the main point, right, the issue going on in this interpretation, ba'a al shem mizbeach hazahav, that the reason why they're doing it is because we do have a case where the golden altar that was found in the tabernacle, in which was used, as we're going to see, strictly for putting spices, for burning incense on it, the word mizbech is still used for that particular altar. Okay, so let me just let this in the words of Torah Temimah, right? Uh, so here we go. Vahu, and that was referring, this golden altar, Mizbeach HaKatoret. It was the altar on which incense was burnt. V'yadua, and we know, shemizbeach zeh, this particular altar, ein ma'alin alav kol davar, nothing was put on it, zulat ktoret, except for incense. The only thing placed on this particular altar was incense. The imkain, and for this reason, kasher. Now there's a difficulty. Lama nikrahu b'shem mizbeach. Why should it be called a mizbeach since you aren't putting zvachim on it, right? So why is it being called a mizbeach? Acharei, since she'ein lo kol yachas v'sheyachut, because it doesn't have any relationship or connection lizvachim, to sacrifices. Likro'o, and it would make more sense for this particular altar to be called B'Shem Miktar, right? There's the noun from Ketoret, right? From incense, burning incense, and so it should have been called a Miktar, but it isn't. Lachen, and for this reason, Darish Oto Benotarikon. And so that's why the rabbis took this approach to the word Mizbeach in the ways in which they interpreted it here. Al Shem, in it's in because Hama'alot Vaskulot, because of the benefits and the virtues sheyeshlo, which the altar has, kedemifarash, as we've explained. So, because the altar brings about these four different virtues, that's why you can call it a mizbeach, even though it's not referring to zavachim per se. So, I'm playing around a little bit with this whole idea of understanding sacrifice better because I don't think people really understand. They judge sacrifices as being a naive way of dealing with worship, and they don't, they're put off by the idea of animals being sacrificed and these kinds of ideas, and see it sort of as, if I may use the term, inappropriately barbaric. Okay. But the truth is, there's a lot of deep, deep thought going into this. And this is one of those cases where we have to try and set aside our own prejudices, and cultural things, and say, what did it mean to them? And what might it mean to us in that particular case? And so this particular drush, where it's saying the idea of people offering a gift, right, in this particular way to God, is a way of trying to deeply relate to our divine creator. And that also presupposes a level of understanding of what it is to have this relationship. And of course, again, you could say that it's an inference from that statement in the Shema: you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And that this represents one of the ways in which that could happen. Can the system be abused? No question about it. We find plenty of examples in the prophetic material where they rail against the abuse of this particular system. That what really counts, and I think it's actually stated, is that what God really wants is the heart. That is the sincerity that goes along with a deep understanding, respect, admiration, fear of God, of our divine creator, and this world in which we live. So that will be it for in terms of what we're covering today. And we'll look at the next section next time. And that's where he's talking about what was actually offered up on the altar, etc. So I'm curious if any of you have any thoughts that you'd like to share at this time before we end the recording. Okay. Yeah.
Giving the animals to the altar. You raise your animals and then you give it to God for sacrifice for your sins. It's wonderful. I mean, but I don't think I would want that to happen today. I would want the temple to be today with the sacrifices. I couldn't see it killing the animals anymore.
Well, maybe that might be legitimate if the world turned vegetarian. But my best argument for this, when people put their noses up at the sacrificial system, is, well, if we're ready to slaughter animals to feed our own appetites, and we're not willing to slaughter animals to try to express our worship, we're not willing to do that. And the truth is that in some ways that brings to light the level of narcissism that is just dribbles through society on all kinds of levels that we don't even think about. Issue is cruelty. Are the animals slaughtered in a cruel way? It's supposed to be instantaneous. It is also a very profound way of trying to encounter our mortality and mortality in general. Death is a great mystery, and it affects us even subconsciously in very profound kinds of ways. And they understood this better than we do. Part of our modern living in Western society is that we're very comfortable, much more comfortable than people were years and years ago. And
I, I, I feel more comfortable with prayer than I do with the animals.
well, no doubt about it. And absolutely. Look, there's a reason. I'm not the whole system developed had to be done by people who were special. Only the priests were the ones who could do this. I do believe that that if you were knowledgeable enough as to how to slaughter the animal, with one draw of the knife and kill it instantaneously, even a non-Kohen could do that. But something that was called the blood service, which was everything that took place in terms of bringing the parts of the animal that had to be put on the altar and everything else had to be done by a Kohen. It was forbidden for a non-Kohen to do something like this. That in itself limits, doing this kind of stuff wholesale. So
Are you
again,
familiar with the Muslim holiday of Eid, EID?
go ahead.
Did you hear me?
Yes, I can.
There's a holiday called EID, Eid.
Yes, yes,
And basically they slaughter animals. You need to buy an animal and then
yes,
bring it to the local slaughterhouse or
yes.
open field. I participated in one of these in Turkey.
Oh, yes.
And I was the only foreigner there because I don't know how I found out about it, but what they do is on the day of Eid, everybody has to buy a sheep, a goat, or something, depending on
Yes.
their wealth and how
Yes.
much they can afford. And they have it slaughtered by you're just up close and personal,
Yes.
and it's enough to make you want to become a vegetarian.
Yes. On the other hand, it can also make one very respectful for the process. I actually was present at a shechting. I was given that privilege to actually see an animal shechted, and I saw myself how instantaneously the animal died when the when the shochet drew
Got the
drew
got the
drew.
jugular vein.
Actually, it is the trachea. It is not the jugular vein.
Oh,
It's the esophagus and the trachea, or the trachea. It is not the jugular vein.
okay, yeah. The esophagus doesn't make sense. All that it's going to do is going to make your
Yeah,
stomach
right.
empty.
But the moment the oxygen is,
Right, that would be
it,
problematic.
it immediately
No,
loses consciousness.
I
I
don't know
actually
if I told
saw
you
the
this.
eyes glazing over, by the way.
I don't know
So
if I told you this. My hometown in Nebraska makes spam.
yes, oh yes.
And then they do it very quickly with those animals. They have this gun that they shoot.
I know, I understand. I know with pigs. I know
Yeah,
they. Okay. I
no,
think
but
at this point maybe I'm going to stop recording.
okay.
Okay, let me do
That's
that.
I
Yeah.
went off topic, Ben.
No, no, it's okay. It's okay.